It's a 2023-2024 season preview of the Cleveland Cavaliers next on The Dime.
You are now listening to The Dime with Josh and Quab, your go-to NBA podcast. Subscribe on Apple, follow on Spotify, and be sure to hit up the YouTube channel for video content. And now your hosts, Josh and Quab.
What's going on, everybody? Welcome to The Dime. Today, we are previewing the 2023-2024 Cleveland Cavaliers with the co-host of the Chase Down podcast. Everybody, please welcome to The Dime for the first time, Justin Rowan. Justin, what's up, man? How's it going?
Thank you so much. I'm doing great. Thank you so much for having me on. I really appreciate it. I'm excited to talk some Cavs and preview what I think is going to be a really exciting season.
Yeah, I think it's going to be a good season for the Cavs as well. I found Justin. I was listening to Cavs podcast, wanted to get a good guest for you guys, and he made me laugh and he seemed very professional. I was like, I got to get this guy on. He wanted to talk some Cavs basketball, as he said his last episode. So here you go, Justin. Here's your chance to talk about
deceived you.
Team.
I love this. I completely bamboozled you. I'm happy to hear that.
All right. So let's get started with the segment we like to call pole dancing.
You know you want it. It's time to go pole dancing. Get your mind out the gutter. We're talking about Twitter polls. My goodness.
All right, I put up 3 polls on our Twitter account. This is how you responded. First question, the Donovan Mitchell and Darius Garland backcourt ranks blank in the East. First, second, third, fourth, or higher. Coming in at first at 40% was it ranks first in the East. Coming in second was second. It ranks second in the East with 30%. And coming in third is they rank fourth or higher at 20%. And in last place was they rank third with 10%. So everybody who answered in the poll thinks that this is the best backcourt in the East. Justin, what do you think?
I think so as well. I was going to go with that, whether or not that was the consensus, because one, I'm a homer, and two, I just think it is, right? Like when you look at the Eastern Conference, I think the number 2 backcourt that I kind of would have in mind is Trae Young and DeJounte Murray. And what separates the Cavs backcourt is I feel like they play so well off of one another, right? Like they're individually great, but they work so well as a tandem. Whereas the Hawks, they're still in that process of figuring things out, right? Like both of them really want to have the ball in their hands. DeJounte's not really a spot-up threat. Darius Garland's ability to play on and off ball is really special. And when you look at other kind of top backcourt players in the Eastern Conference, someone like Tyrese Halliburton, there just isn't really that proven number 2 alongside him. So I think both how well they play together and how good they are individually probably gives the Cavs kind of the edge right now as best backcourt in the Eastern Conference.
Were you worried at first about the fit when the trade was first announced?
I wasn't worried about the fit, but my concern about it was basically in the NBA, you really only get that one chance to go all in with like all your picks and all that kind of stuff, right? Like that's the way it goes. And for me, like you're obviously upgrading when you're going from Colin Sexton to Donovan Mitchell, but you still have concerns, right? Like it is still a smaller backcourt and you still have that hole at the small forward position. So that was more my concern. But I really was confident that Darius Garland's ability to play on and off ball was going to make it easy to integrate another star into the mix. And I think the fact that his stats basically stayed the same while putting in someone like Donovan Mitchell and, help Donovan Mitchell have the most efficient and best year of his career. I think that's a real feather in his cap, and I'm interested to see how that partnership evolves.
Yeah, they played really well together, and it kind of surprises me. Like when you look at the stats, they played with the slowest pace in the league last year, and that really surprised. Like, do you expect them to play faster next year? I know this is a season preview, so next year, like, is that something you want bigger staff to kind of implement, like them running a little more, or are you cool with the slow pace?
Yeah, I think JB wants them to run more. He's joked about it that, hey, I want to play a slow pace because that's a hot button topic when it comes to the Cavs.
Yeah.
But when you actually watch him in the game, he's cycling his arms, right? Like he's telling them to get up and down the field,
let's go!
up and down the court.
On!
Right. Yeah, let's speed this up a little bit.
Yeah.
And we actually just dove into this on our most recent episode of the Chase Down, which was the Cavs, especially after Isaac Okoro came in the starting lineup, they were 16th in terms of transition frequency. Okay. But and even for the season, they were 19th, but they're still dead last in pace. To me, that means they are taking way too long in the half court. They're going way too late in the shot clock. And to me, that comes down to Darius Garland and Donovan Mitchell to really kind of get them into their sets earlier. Because I think, especially when you look at some of their issues late in the shot clock and things like that, I think that's because they just don't give themselves enough time. So I do expect the pace to pick up a little bit. I think having guys like Max Strus and George Niang that are willing to take contested and quick shots and pull-up shots in transition, all that kind of stuff can really elevate your pace, because when you look at the difference between dead last and top 10 in pace, it's 5 possessions over the course of a game. So in a 24-second shot clock scenario, a couple more quick shots, a little more speed in the half court can really elevate where you are in those ranks.
All right, so that's a good transition to question number 2. What letter grade would you give the Cavs offseason moves? Coming in at first was a letter grade of C at 50%. Coming in second was a letter grade of B at 33.3%. Coming in at third was a letter grade of A at 16.7%. No one gave you an F. What letter grade would you give the Cavs offseason moves?
You know, you got a real smart audience here. I mostly agree with them. I would go B.
Okay.
I don't think you can ever really get an A if you're not bringing in like a star level guy, right? But the Cavs had very limited resources to work with, right? Like they really only had that mid-level exception. You had Karis LeVert, who I think they signed for, you know, a great deal. There's still some sticker shock when you look at like what these guys signed for, and it's going to take myself and all NBA fans time to get adjusted to it. But when you look at it as a percentage of the cap, what Karis LeVert and Max Strus signed for is less than J.R. Smith and Iman Shumpert got when the Cavs won a title.
Right.
It's less than Channing Frye got the year that they won on that contract that he was on, right? So like that, it's just a totally different dynamic now. And I think being able to, you know, maybe go a little bit over the mid-level exception to get Max Strus, and then still keeping that in your back pocket to add George Niang, that was not something that I expected them to be able to do. And I think, you know, adding a 6'5" guard like Ty Jerome, someone that, you know, not super dynamic, but he's got size. He's a good offensive player, gives you another option you can go to in the backcourt. Like, if you're starting 2 short guards, having that third guard being someone that's 6'5", that gives you a little bit of offensive juice and size, I think that's really important. So I feel like a B plus is definitely where I'd go.
We're going to touch on the playoff series a little bit later, but one of the main issues you guys had during the Knicks series was the 3 position and shooting. Do you feel like they made an adequate, like with the signings, they made an adequate response to all those problems?
I think adequate's probably the right word, right?
Okay.
Like they didn't hit it out of the park. Like there is no big 3-and-D wing that's available when you only have the mid-level exception to work with, right? Like those players are rare and they rarely hit free agency. I do think that they added enough spacing around them that you can properly evaluate the core that you have. And I think that's really, really important because the Knicks really overcommitted on taking away the pick and roll ball handler and roll man away from the Cavs just because they didn't respect the spacing they had around them. And I just don't think you're going to be able to do that with Max Strus and George Niang. Strus killed the Knicks in that series against the Miami,
bro. This is
and the funny thing about Max Strus is you look at him over the last 2 years, he was in the 4th percentile in terms of how many shots of his were open.
Yeah.
He takes nothing but contested shots. So either his shot quality is about to improve or the shot quality of Mitchell, Garland, Mobley, and Allen is going to improve. So I think they have more versatility, and I think you have a better ability to analyze exactly what this core is. Do they work together? Because you have the right role guys around them.
This question actually is kind of like a podcast inside joke. We have to ask you because we're talking about Max Strus. Do you believe in he culture? Is it real? Is Max Strus going to turn into a pumpkin? Is he going to turn into a pumpkin once he puts on the Cavs jersey?
Look, I don't think all of a sudden he's going to forget how to shoot because his jersey went from red to wine. I don't worry about that. But I think he culture is absolutely real, man. The accountability, you know, getting these guys in the right environment, work ethic, all that kind of stuff. But I don't think this is like, I think people equate it to like when guys would play for the Spurs and teams would sign role players from the Spurs and all of a sudden they turn into a pumpkin. It's a little bit different because you look at those Spurs teams, it was nothing but quality looks for those guys, you know, playing off of Duncan, Ginobili, Parker. Max Strus, is hitting tough contested shots. I don't think all of a sudden he's going to shoot worse on open
From like
looks.
30 feet,
That's
dude.
not how this
With the
works.
shot clock, I'm having flashbacks.
I can hear the PTSD cracks in your voice
Oh my
there as
goodness.
he's
Yeah,
doing that to you.
he hit one shot from like 35 feet out with the shot clock running down with like a hand in his face, like RJ Barrett. I'm just like, this series is over. It's game 2, but the series is over. I know it's over.
It's amazing the trauma that a
Right?
short playoff series can have on you. Like, I'm watching Team Canada basketball, and anytime RJ misses an open three, I'm like, where was that? What are you doing?
That's right. Yeah, you're from Canada. You live in Canada. I forgot about that.
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, I mean, he's doing okay for you now, so you could root for him now.
Yeah.
Maybe he'll turn back into
Great
a
game against
Who knows?
Slovenia. Shout out to him.
All right. And question number 3: the 2023-2024 Cleveland Cavaliers are blank. Coming in at first is a playoff team at 57.1%. Coming in second was an Eastern Conference contender at 28.6%. And coming in third, which I found kind of interesting, was lottery team, but I spelled it lotter. I forgot the Y. So a lotter team at 14.3%. No one said they're a championship contender. Justin, how would you have answered this? And do you think there's a chance that they could become a championship contender if that's not your answer?
I don't think I can necessarily put them in a championship contender because I have so much respect for the process, right? Like,
Okay.
experience matters so much in the NBA. And like going into the playoffs last year and even throughout the year, like I would consider myself an optimistic fan. Like, I like to talk about what I think is realistic. And then I'm like maybe 5 to 10% above like the realistic kind of medium outcome. All year we said, yeah, they have the metrics of a contender, but they're not one. They're going to fall apart. They're going to have a stupid series. They're going to beat themselves in a lot of ways. We still don't have like the right rotation guys around them. It's going to take time. This is the first year where I think now you can kind of have them in that dark horse category.
Okay.
And I think it's possible for them to maybe make an Eastern Conference Finals run. So I think you'd call them an Eastern contender in that way. Especially you look at like Philly getting worse. I don't really like what Boston did. I think that there's a path available to them, and Milwaukee beats themselves every other year in the playoffs. So you have to factor that in. I don't know if I can see them winning a title, but I do think, taking a major step forward. I expect them to win a round, be competitive in the second round, and I kind of feel like Eastern Conference Finals is their ceiling.
All right. Who the hell voted lottery team?
I don't know.
That's the part
I'm
I'm
the
just
hater.
like.
Well, maybe they were voting lauder. Like there
maybe
might be
so.
a definition of lauder that I just don't know about. We shouldn't really dismiss
That's
this.
true. They're a
People
lauder
might just
team.
have a
Fair
more
enough.
robust vocabulary than we do.
All right, so let's finish. That's done with pole dancing. Let's move on to the actual season preview. Before we do that, though, I do want to talk about the series about the Knicks, not to gloat, but just like to get your perspective, because just be completely transparent. I'm a huge Knicks fan. The Knicks winning in 5 shocked the shit out of me. I'm not gonna lie. To me, I thought it was a toss up. I picked the Knicks in 7 strictly probably just because I'm a Knicks fan. It was some homerism in me. But if the Cavs won in 6, I'd be like, yeah, that makes sense. What went wrong? Like from a Cavs fan perspective, because I saw it from a Knicks fan perspective, and I judged it on one series, but you saw the team throughout the whole season, and then you saw the playoff series. Like, what was the difference between the Cavs in the regular season and the Cavs in the playoff series against the Knicks?
Yeah, I think when you look at the Cavs last year, they were a team that had a good fastball, right? Like they had a really effective action that they ran, which a lot of it, it's the split cuts, like really borrowing from like that Warriors and Heat playbook and using Mobley in that BAM role. And the thing we talked about all year was if you have a team that's built around backcourt production, the only teams that win with that have some sort of front court playmaker, whether that's a Draymond Green, whether that's LeBron. Even when you had Kawhi Leonard and Marc Gasol. Sorry, I was just watching some awful takes about how Christian Wood is Pau Gasol.
Oh my god!
Oh no!
I saw that. I saw that. I'm not even. Richard
Sherman. He even
oh
skipped just like rubbing his eyes, being like, "Oh god, this is a bit too much."
Oh my god.
Anyways, you always have that front court playmaker, and you look with Mobley in that series in particular. He had an awful series offensively. Like he averaged 0.08 points per possession in the pick and roll. He went over 10 as a roll man in that series, and the decision making wasn't there. And credit to the Knicks. Obviously, they forced him to try to be a scorer in those situations. They took away all of his non-scoring options. And I think that extra half second of thinking about it threw him off. Obviously, even the adjustments that Tibbs made of, after game 2, having a guard screen
Yeah.
for Jalen Brunson rather than having Mitchell Robinson. All of a sudden, that meant that Jared Allen had to come up and contest whoever was getting past the point of attack defender, taking him out of position to defend Mitchell Robinson, to put a body on him, generating those second chance opportunities. Like the Knicks offense, you look at it, they had a 2.7 offensive rating in the half court for that series, even factoring in the offensive rebounds. That was horrible.
Yeah.
They were not an efficient offense, but they took the Cavs out of what they did well offensively, and the Cavs just didn't have the versatility to play multiple styles. Now, I think if you play the series over again, it probably goes longer,
Yeah.
the majority of the time. I think those issues are still going to be there, and I think the Knicks win the series a lot of the time as a result
Okay.
of that. But, like even if like Donovan Mitchell, he takes a lot of contested shots, and as a result of that, you kind of have some variance there. If he shoots like he does in the regular season, if Evan Mobley plays a little bit better, then maybe there's the cyclical effect there, right, where the Knicks don't get out in transition as much. It makes things a little bit easier. You get confidence going, and it's a longer series. But the Knicks deserve full credit, and the Cavs deserve credit for taking that loss seriously, right?
Yeah.
Saying, we're not just going to rely on the internal growth, although that's going to be the major determining factor. We're going to go out and we're going to add the right rotation pieces. We're going to add a lot of shooting. We're going to add some size. So I think it was definitely an illustrative series.
I actually had the Cavs winning the series. I
Yeah,
think,
you did.
Josh.
You did.
Yeah,
You did.
okay. I did. Okay,
Good
yeah.
friend.
Trying to rub it in, but yeah. But
Yeah. You and me both.
yeah, hey.
Well, Justin, it's understandable that you did. I get why you did.
Yeah.
The reason why, also partly the reason why I did is because there are a lot of ex-Nets players that are on the Cavs that
He's a Nets fan.
I'm a lifelong Nets fan. So one of them being Jared Allen, who I love. Why did he say the lights were too bright? Why did he make that?
You know what? Honestly, I've got a take for you here.
Okay.
Because Mitchell and Garland have said similar things where Mitchell's like, we were a little rattled. It was loud in the garden and stuff like that. I would rather have Jared Allen being confident enough to kind of admit, like, collectively the lights were a little too bright than being like defensive and being like, no, we were ready for it. We just, some weird things happen. Like, I give him a little bit of props for saying that. And like, that meme is going to live forever now, and that sucks for him. But like, he just turned 25 years old. Jared Allen has been a driving force for the Cavs' success, and I just feel like this is the type of group that's going to bounce back from getting embarrassed in that way, because they came, like, I always break up the regular season and postseason as two different parts of the year, because like, when you're a fan, you're talking about a 4 or 5 month stretch of my life where 3 to 4 times a week I am measuring, are you making me have fun? Am I having a good winter here? Especially living in Canada, it's -50 out here half the time, right? Like, this is all I've got. So the fact that the Cavs had such a great regular season, I still like, I cherish that, and I think it was a successul year. But the playoffs were a failure. So I'm interested to see how they bounce back from that.
I know that we mentioned Heat culture earlier, and one of the driving forces of the Heat being successful in the playoffs was Kevin Love, who left you guys. Was it, when looking back on it, do you think he would have helped during the playoff series if you guys still had him?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I wasn't really expecting him to be very productive against New York, but he was good in that series. And that's one of those tough things to measure, because when you look at it, like, when Miami added Kevin Love, he was not good for the regular season, right? Like the rest of the year, but they gave him a lot of minutes, and they were making an investment that, hey, if we give him enough time here, we can turn things around. The Cavs were, in a different position, right, where they were losing all of his minutes. Like, January was their worst month. They went 500 in it, and his minutes were a disaster. It was actually a loss to the Knicks that got him yanked out of the rotation pretty much permanently. And I just don't know if he's not getting those starters minutes. Does he get comfortable in time? He wasn't effective in the play-in either, and Miami wasn't even able to play him in those 2 games. So it's one of those tough things. But when you look at the Cavs' needs in that series, and even the Cavs' needs now, like a backup 4 that gives you defensive rebounding, that spaces the floor, that's not something that they have, and that's one of my questions about them coming into this year. So yeah, like a theoretical Kevin Love would have made a big difference. Dean Wade having physical setbacks with his separated collarbone. That obviously hurt because that was supposed to be kind of the replacement there in the rotation. But you know what? Hindsight's 50-50. I didn't love getting him bought out. I don't know everything that went on behind the scenes there, but it definitely was one of those kind of losses that you take along the way when it comes to team building.
Gotcha.
So you mentioned before how we were talking about the slow pace of the Cavaliers, and how you think the shooting might help with that. Is there anything else you would like Bickerstaff to implement so they're not so reliant on Garland and Mitchell? Maybe Mobley, some sets for Mobley where he can be a playmaker or something like that.
Yeah, I definitely want like talk about heat culture.
Yeah.
I want Mobley. I hope Mobley spent a lot of this summer watching tape of Bam Adebayo, because the Cavs were when it comes to like cuts, points off of cuts, they had the second most frequent points off of cuts in the league last year, and they were doing that without much spacing. They were also the most efficient team when it came to points off of cuts, and a lot of that was using Mobley as a hub, using him in the short roll and a lot of those scenarios. And I definitely want to see, especially when you stagger, where, I think the whole kind of beauty of having Mobley and Allen and Garland and Mitchell is you can always have at least one elite playmaker and one elite defender on the court at all times. When it's just like Garland and Mobley, I want to see Mobley develop a lot more of that playmaking, especially with spacing around them. I'd be really interested to see that aspect of his game develop. And I think one of the biggest things is he's great as a passer in those scenarios, and the Cavs are creative in generating movement even without shooting. I want to see that movement evolve now that they do have shooting, right? Because just because you're able to get creative with the personnel you have doesn't necessarily mean the offense is automatically going to evolve with adding new pieces. So that's a big JB question. And then the Mobley part of it is, can he be more effective on the keep in those scenarios, right? Like that pull-up jumper from the free throw line in, right? The floater, when being a little stronger when he takes it all the way to the rim. There were far too many times when Mitchell Robinson's just staying underneath the basket and being like, you're not going to take this floater. Like, and Mobley, rather than taking the pull-up jumper or throwing the floater, he would dribble into him. And, some of those passes went off the backboard, and he just wasn't confident in those spots. So even though it was a strength of him throughout the regular season, building upon that strength and getting it to a point where that's going to translate to the playoffs, I think is a really important thing for them.
What do you think? Go ahead.
I was going to ask the same question. I was going to ask, what do you think his ceiling is when it comes to Mobley?
Yeah.
I love it. Man, I think he can be really special. Like, I think that he's the type of guy that can get into, that defensive player of the year conversation, and offensively, like, if he can be a 7-foot Bam Adebayo instead of a 6'9" one, like, I'm interested to see what that combination means, right? And it's funny because that's, an archetype that doesn't always get the respect it deserves. Like, Bam's been such a major piece for Miami, and he's only made the All-Star team twice out of 6 years. So I don't know necessarily like how to measure it in terms of accolades, but I definitely think he can be that kind of player, and we'll see like how far he can go when it comes to that kind of stuff. Like, I'd like to see him add a 3-point shot, but I don't think that's as essential, right? Like, I want to see that mid-range game. I want to see him develop off the dribble, the passing, and all that kind of stuff.
So I guess the elephant in the room with the Cavs is the Donovan Mitchell situation and the contract, and whether he's going to stay or he's going to go. What's your feel of that, and what's the feel among Cavs fans, like what he's going to do?
Yeah, I think there's like some paranoia and PTSD. I mean, you're talking about Max Strus hitting shots. How can you not have that after the way that LeBron James went, right? But you look at the reporting, and like the number one priority when people close to Donovan Mitchell talk about him always is winning, right? Like, he's going to want to be in the best situation for him, right? So you're always going to have like the looming Knicks and stuff like that. But I don't worry about it too much at this point, because, even if Donovan Mitchell was fully bought in right now, so much can change throughout the course of a year. You have to, as a team, especially in the modern NBA, it's a partnership with players, right? Like, you want to make sure that they're collaborating with you, that everyone's on the same page, that they feel like this is going in the right direction. And if the Cavs do their part, I feel like he would extend with the Cavs, right? Like, if they convince him that this is the best spot for him to win, then you want to look at an extension there. And like, in theory, Donovan Mitchell, like, he doesn't have the playmaking chops to play the point guard, So if he's always playing shooting guard, that means he's almost always going to be part of a small backcourt. Unless he's playing with like
Right.
Shea or Halliburton, it's going to be a small backcourt. So playing with, a point guard that's so good on and off ball like Darius Garland, that's already, that's a great fit.
Yeah.
If you're going to have a small backcourt, you're going to want to have that backline support.
Yeah.
And, Evan Mobley and Jared Allen, that's exactly the type of archetype that you have. So if Garland, Mobley, Allen, like if they don't take the step forward that we think, and they're not the players that we think, and it's not the right situation for Donovan Mitchell to win, that might be like a evaluation that the Cavs themselves make of, do we really want to extend Donovan Mitchell if this fit isn't right? Like,
maybe we don't want you, Donovan.
right. Like I'm saying that
Yeah.
in the modern NBA, like that's, you have to look at both
Yeah, it makes
sides
sense.
of it. Now,
Makes sense.
I expect, like, if you put a gun to my head, I think there's going to be an extension because stars just don't hit free agency anymore,
Okay.
right? Like
Yeah.
they extend and then you evaluate.
Right,
And maybe
right.
2 years later, we're looking at this. Okay, is this working out? Is this not?
Right.
But I don't worry about it because nothing's really guaranteed in the NBA, and I feel like this is a very good fit for him. And as long as the Cavs do their part and this core is as good as we think it can be, I think they're going to have a very compelling pitch when it comes to extension talks.
Outside of like the core four, is there anybody you expect to make a impact or make a jump to help the team take another step?
And I would love to say Isaac Okoro here just because, like, he is the same age as Evan Mobley, which I think people overlook. You look at his last 100 games, he's shooting 38% from three. There's just not the volume to it. Obviously, a lot of those looks are wide open. But I'm interested to see, especially if he's coming in off the bench, he's going to have more space, right? Like, he's going to be playing with only one big out there. Maybe you're playing him a little more at shooting guard. I'd like to see him kind of follow that Josh Hart path of being someone that impacts the game in a lot of ways, gets the kind of event defense of steals and blocks, gets the rebounds, that sort of thing. I'm interested to see his growth there, but honestly, it might be Max Strus. Like, I just think they haven't had a movement shooter like that, someone that's so confident of taking those shots. And if you're looking to develop Mobley as a playmaker and implement a lot of kind of like those Bam and Draymond type sets, having a guy that's played in that kind of system is a real benefit, right? Because Max Strus knows where to be, not only when he's involved in kind of those three-man actions, he knows when he's on the weak side of how to get into those passing lanes. He's going to be someone that can be in Mobley's ear about optimizing those scenarios and taking advantage of it. He can provide some secondary playmaking too. I'm just really excited for what he can bring to this team.
Now, obviously, we haven't started. We haven't not even preseason yet, so we don't know what the Cavs are look like theoretically. But if I gave you like the GM hat right now, and it's a trade deadline. What are you looking for? What position are you looking for? What type of archetype are you looking for to help this Cavs team moving forward?
Yeah, I mean, ideally, you're looking for that Kevin Love type, right? Okay. Like that backup four.
Just had him.
You're looking. Yeah, I know. You're looking for that third big that can space the floor, right? Okay. Because I think, like, I love having Mobley and Allen on this team. I think, when you're able to have each of them play 16 minutes at center and then 16 minutes together, you got 48 minutes of really high-end center play, right? And having the right guy to play the four alongside that to make those combinations work, I think would be ideal. I do think George Niang is going to be nice in that role, but he doesn't bring you kind of the rebounding that you want, right? And there's going to be some matchups defensively where maybe that can get a little bit tricky. So I think that's probably the position that you look at the most. Like, if we're talking about the trade deadline, I really do think that Karis LeVert's going to have a nice role with this team. Like, he really developed as a playmaker. I don't think people realize he shot 39% from three last year as well.
He played well in the series against the Knicks too. He played well.
Yeah, and he's improved as a defender as well. Yeah. And I'm interested to see what more spacing does for him because he's always been just such a high-level pick-and-roll ball handler. But, he might be that expendable piece, right? Like, if you do get development out of Isaac Okoro, if Ty Jerome really kind of finds his footing, that might be the piece that you have to go out and address needs at the deadline or bring in a bigger wing. Because I think, like, if the Cavs have the opportunity to bring in a wing where, maybe it's just a salary that a team doesn't necessarily like and Cleveland can take advantage of that scenario, I think you still do that, right? Like, I think Max Strus is going to help with the starting lineup a lot. But he's also a guy that if he's coming in off the bench and playing at the 2 and 3, I feel really good about that as well.
Yeah.
So if there's an opportunity at a bigger wing, that'd be great. I don't really see that as realistic, so that's why I kind of had that backup 4 position in mind.
I got a name for you that was kind of rumored. Royce O'Neal from the Nets.
Royce would be
Stop
great.
trying to make deals, Quab.
Royce,
Stop trying to bring the
I'm
band
not trying to
back
make
together,
deals.
Quab.
Look,
You want the band
no,
back
listen.
together. They're not coming back
Royce-
together.
if I'm not mistaken, I even saw him working out with the Cavs in the offseason.
Donovan Mitchell is his best friend.
Well, exactly. Look, if you could get a best friend of Donovan Mitchell on this team, like I would love to have him. Again, he doesn't really have the size, right? Like I think Royce is only 6'4" or whatever, but he plays a little bit bigger than his size, so similar to Max Strus in that way. But the more wings, the better, man. Like I would love to have Royce on the Cavs.
All right, so gonna put you on the spot here. I know it's early again. I know we haven't had preseason. Don't know what the season looks like. But if you were to predict what the Cavs are going to be this year, where they're going to finish, what the playoffs are going to look like, what would your prediction be?
I think that, and you look at it last year, 51 wins. Not the most deep team. I think they really improved their depth, and they also had among the most player games missed last year, right? Like they weren't particularly healthy. You look at Philadelphia getting worse. I don't really love what Boston did. I think they might be a little bit uneven in the regular season. I think the Cavs are probably going to finish in that 2 to 3 range in the East in terms of regular season.
Okay.
Now, if I'm power ranking like how much confidence I have in teams in the playoffs, I'm not putting the Cavs at 2 or 3, right? Like they're going to need to go out and prove it. But if Porzingis is missing time, Miami, even if they get Dame, all of those guys miss time. Philadelphia is a mess. Like there's just a lot of teams that are, for one reason or another, probably not going to live up to expectations in the regular season. And Milwaukee might change their approach too, right? Like you don't have Budenholzer in there that's trying to kill teams on every single one of those nights where it's Monday in Charlotte and we're going to beat them by 50, right? Like they might take a bit of a different approach with such a veteran heavy team. So I think the Cavs are going to get about 55, 56 wins, 2-3 range in the Eastern Conference, and hopefully that puts them in a better position to win around this year.
How many All-Stars you expect from the team?
Oh,
I'm gonna go 2. I'm gonna go 2. I think Garland got snubbed last year. I think some of that had to do with missing so much time at the start of the year with Gary Trent Jr. poking his eye out in the first game of the season.
Yeah.
But I expect a big leap from Darius Garland as well. I think that this is a year where he really comes into his own.
all right. Well, Justin Rowan, thank you for coming on the show, representing the Cleveland Cavaliers. Let everybody know where they can find you, your podcast, all that good stuff, anything you got going on.
Absolutely. So wherever you guys were listening to this podcast, you can find the Chase Down podcast. We talk about the Cavs. We talk about the rest of the NBA. We go off season once a week, twice a week during the regular season. We usually stream live to the Cavs YouTube channel, so you can subscribe there. And we go live, and you don't miss a broadcast that way. And you can find me on Twitter as well, at Cavs Canada. Just slap the Cavs in Canada and you'll find me there. I apologize for everything you find after that point. I take no responsibility for any of my actions.
Quick, how did you become a Cavs fan in Canada?
Man.
Was it LeBron? It's probably LeBron, right?
LeBron was a big factor of it. We got lost Central Division games here, living right in like the middle of Canada. I didn't want to jump on the Bulls bandwagon because even though Mike was gone, it's like, that like there's so many Bulls fans. It was between Detroit and Cleveland, and LeBron kind of sealed it for me. Then post decision, like Winnipeg's got a cursed sports history. We've started to turn around a little bit now. We're winning more. Yeah. But after the decision, I started relating to Cleveland even more. And that's when I started blogging about the team. That's when I started podcasting about the team. And I've been a Cavs fan ever since.
All right, man. Well, sounds
Very
good.
nice.
Thanks for joining us. Great guest. We'll have you on during the season. Definitely when the Cavs make a move or
I'm
relevant
in.
The Cavaliers. All right, listen, if you want to follow The Dime, you can on Twitter, Instagram, and make sure you subscribe to our YouTube channel at The Dime NBA. I'm Josh Rodriguez at Josh_Rodriguez_. He's Quab at Quab AKS. We'll see you next week for another episode of The Dime.